Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. I'm Isabel Wong, a financial journalist who wants to uncover the many Asian stories around us that are waiting to be told. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Mauie Muñoz, a Filipino business development associate in a digital marketing and talent agency. Born and raised in the Philippines, she talks to us about her experience growing up, what people get wrong about Filipinos, and what she wants the world to know about the Philippines. Welcome to Proudly Asian, Mauie. It's nice to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor, actually, to be part of this.
I know that you've been spending some time in LA. How do you find LA so far?
Actually, it's pretty nice. It's totally different from the Philippines. And I've been actually asked this question before. And they asked me, like, if you will describe LA or the US in one word, what would that be? And I was like, space. There's just so many space. Like the road's so wide, everything's spaced out. So yeah, but yeah, it's pretty great so far. I'm liking it.
Have you been checking out some hip places in LA? What are some of the best places that you have been to so far?
Well, for sure, Disneyland. That's like number one in my agenda because I haven't been. Even in other countries, I haven't been. So like, I would need to go to Disneyland, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, and then definitely In-N-Out.
Yes.
When I flew here, the first order of business is to go to In-N-Out.
That's priority.
Very tourist stuff, yeah.
And I also know that you've been doing some really like glitzy and glamorous stuff, such as you were at the Bling Empire launch party. I mean, you look so nice in that evening gown. Can you tell us more about what you did there? You know, how was the party?
Wow, yeah, it was surreal. Like I would have never thought to actually be a part of it. So basically, the reason why we're there is because we co-organized the event itself. Because of work, we actually represent some of the stars of the show. And we were invited, so that's pretty cool. And actually, when I was thinking about what dress to wear, because I wasn't prepared, I didn't know that that's gonna happen. So I asked my auntie, do you have a black dress? This is the event that I'm going to. And she's like, yes, I have. And what's nice is that it has a flower embellishment on the side that's actually the color of the Philippine flag.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. So when I was in the event, a social media correspondent from E! News actually asked me, where did you get your dress? I'm like, oh, it's my auntie's dress. But who's the designer? I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know. And she's like, yeah, because I love everything. Like, oh yeah, this is the color of the Philippine flag. And she was like, oh, Filipina. I'm like, yes, Philippine represent.
Wow. It has this double meaning to the dress. Wow, that's beautiful.
I was actually really proud to wear that dress. You know, it becomes like extra special, especially that people notice and they know that it's the color of the Philippine flag. So that was pretty cool.
Wow, yeah. You definitely look absolutely gorgeous when I was like scrolling through the photos.
Thank you.
But now let's get to know a little bit more about you, Mauie. I mean, let's start with the basics. This is a question that I ask every guest that comes on the show. Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up? And also, how many languages do you speak?
I'm born and raised in the Philippines. So I lived there for 26 years. And this is actually the first time that I'm flying to the US. So it's a good experience for me. And the reason why I'm in the US is because I work for a company based in LA. So I'm a business development professional for a digital marketing and talent agency. And what I do is I connect brands with talents, or I also connect talents with brands, vice versa. So it's like bringing in opportunities for the talents that we have and doing some marketing campaigns with the brands that I'm talking to. So basically that's what I do. I'm a middle child. So I just want to put it out there. Yeah. So middle child syndrome. Hello. I have an older sister and a younger brother, which is also kind of cool. So I think that's pretty much it. The only language I know is actually Filipino and English. I studied French back in college, totally flunked it. I tried again and then failed. So I was like, okay, that's not for me. I'll just stick to English and Tagalog. That's it.
That's already pretty amazing because you're bilingual. But I mean, I'm the same. I also pretty much flopped my French in high school. I don't remember a thing now. So
it's hard, right?
It's
hard. It's such a beautiful language, but it's so hard to, especially the numbers. And when you're counting, as the numbers like go up, there's more words. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's amazing. Like, so I bet you work with a lot of celebrities in your day job then. That's pretty cool.
It's more of an influencer. So it's crazy, right? Because like you have a whole industry for social media and digital talents. So primarily for me, I engage with Instagram influencers, TikTok influencers, and YouTubers. And that's actually our goal, is to switch them from online personality to actually being a celebrity or a reality star. So basically that's our end goal as a company, and actually to also help them create content that the world would love. So yeah.
And I know that you mentioned your little brother. He's also a bit of influencer in the Philippines as well, isn't he?
Yes. Actually, because of that, it sparked my interest in the industry. So back in the Philippines, I help him manage like the business stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, so there are some brands that's reaching out to him and he doesn't really know what to do with it. So as a big sister, I just have to step in and help him like answer emails. And then I realized, wow, there's a whole job for this. I need to find what this is about. So I did my research, and that's when it kind of sparked the interest in me, like, hey, I like social media as a whole, but I don't necessarily want to be an influencer. I don't want to be in front of the camera. Maybe I can be on the background. So that's when I decided to actually jump into digital marketing. And that's when I found this opportunity. Yeah, so that's the shift.
Yeah, definitely business managers like you are actually the bread and butter of the whole influencer industry, because a lot of the times like content creators don't know, how to market their business or even market themselves. They need someone who has the insights, or like as an outsider, to tell them, what to do, how they can better position themselves. This is, I guess, where you come in.
100%.
So your little brother is so lucky to have you.
Oh, yes, he is.
But going back to your background, you were born and raised in the Philippines. I just want to know, what was it like growing up in the Philippines? How was your schooling experience? Did you have to deal with parents' expectations? And going back to the day-to-day, what was breakfast food like?
Well, I would like to think that my childhood is pretty normal. We're not struggling per se. Like, it's pretty normal. Like, we have food on the table. But to answer like the question in terms of what are the expectations, that's something that I'm very interesting to talk about, especially if you have siblings. So when you're in the Philippines, I don't know if it's just us or like it's a Filipino culture, but as far as I know, it is common, especially with my friends who has siblings. There's some sort of like an internal competition. In terms of expectations, I always joke around with my parents that from the start, I tried to lower down their expectations so that when I achieve something, it's like, yay, Mauie, good job. Because I don't want them to expect so much from me. But at the same time, like my sister's like super intelligent. It's crazy. Like, I don't know. I feel like she's like a walking encyclopedia of some sort. So with that being said, even though like I'm trying to like set a lower standard for myself, it's because my sister's like achieving so much. There's some sort of like comparison, like unconsciously, even though like my parents would be like, oh, it's fine, as long as you're not failing. But I feel like there's like an internal competition, because when you have a sister who's super close to your age, often than not, you get compared with each other, especially in terms of studies. So that's something that growing up, I kind of struggled with. So what I did to cope is to just copy whatever my sister does. Like, oh, that's working for her. Okay, I'm gonna do that too.
Wow.
So yeah, so I'm like, okay, when I'm trying to do my own thing, it's not working for me. So I'm just gonna copy whatever she does. So I go to the same school as her, like if she likes something, I feel like, oh, I think I would like this too. I'll try it out. So that's something that, even up until now, I feel like there's still some sort of like, not really competition, but more of a comparison right now. But it's getting better. But yeah, I mean, from a childhood perspective, in general, I have a pretty normal childhood. Of course, you have like your own experiences of having friends at school or the type of school that you come into. So just to also give you like a context, in the Philippines, we have like a private and a public school, right? And there's like this connotation wherein, oh, if you're in a private school, you're rich, you can afford. So from nursery to grade 1 up until grade 6, we're in a private school. And then come high school, we switched to a public school. And that's where I kind of struggled, not because I don't want to go to a public school, but because people were like, oh, why did you switch to a public school? You were in a private school, right? Why? Are you poor now or whatnot? So what I'm trying to say is that I feel like when you're growing up, even though like you're just a kid, people have these expectations of you that you don't even understand yourself. Because I'm like, I don't know, I'm just going to school. What are you talking about? I didn't know that there's like, that people see private school and public school differently until they pointed it out to me. So all of my high school life, I'm in a public school, which is actually a great school, to be honest. It's an art school. And because people were telling me those things, when I'm about to go to college, I am really set to be on a private school again. I know it kind of sounds petty, but because it was like feed in your head, like, okay, I don't want people to see me like in a certain way. So I want to go into this school because it's nice. It's well known. Sorry, I went too far, but that's like generally my childhood. I mean, my point actually is that I do have a good childhood, sister fights, brotherly fights here and there. But I feel like it's not just me. That's why I wanted to point out that even though you have a good childhood, it's not always glitz and glamour. It's not like always, oh, it's fun. Oh, okay, lucky you because people are struggling more than you. No, there are also some other aspects that people doesn't know that you personally are struggling with. And people would think, oh, you're just being petty, but it actually affects you and like how you grow up, and it actually changes your mindset. So that's my childhood. But in terms of food, I want to answer the food part. So when you're in the Philippines, rice is life.
Yes.
Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, it's always rice. And I feel like all of the food, like adobo, sinigang, is way better with rice. So I grew up eating rice all the time. Different types. Fried rice, reheated rice, freshly cooked rice. So food in the Philippines revolves around rice. So, yeah.
That was really nice that you talked about your childhoods, your relationship with your siblings, because definitely I do agree with what you pointed out. A lot of the times when we were growing up, as a kid or as a teenager, we don't necessarily know what's right for us. We would just kind of like listen to whatever, people around us say. So if someone told me as a teenager that this was good, this was no good, or like you mentioned, if you went to a private school, it means you're rich, and if you switch to a public school, it means your family suddenly got poor. That really gets into your head, and that really kind of, in an early age, it shapes you and your thinking. And as you become an adult, it takes years to unlearn those impressions or expectations, and it takes a lot of courage to just do your own thing and not care about, what people think of you, right?
Exactly.
And at the same time, I think it's quite interesting that you mentioned mentioned that internal comparison with your siblings, because I'm actually the eldest in my family. And I have two sisters. They are actually twins.
Okay.
Yeah, who are 6 years younger than me. During my childhood, throughout the years, I think they both would see me as this sort of like role model type of figure as the eldest sister.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think growing up, I felt a bit of pressure, having to do everything right. So it sets a good example for them. But at the same time, I think these days I've also kind of like worked on changing that dynamic, right? I don't want them to feel like I am always better than them in all aspects. Like I would always tell them, I might look like I'm doing well in this aspect, but there are still struggles. Like I still get tired. It's not always like that perfect role model image that they see from afar. So that was quite interesting.
Well, actually, my sister has a term for that specific feeling of pressure. She feels like she's the guinea pig because she's the eldest. So her perspective, because I actually told her, I confronted her. I was like, Ate, you're setting up a high standard. You're making it hard for me to catch up. And she was like, what are you talking about? I feel so much pressure to do well because I know that you guys look up to me. I feel like I'm the guinea pig because I'm the one who's experiencing everything for the first time. And when it's your time, you will just look at me as a reference and be like, oh, she was able to do it, so I can do it. Or I can just ask her, Ate, how do I like get past or get over this? What should I do? So yeah, that's actually a pretty interesting insight. Like hearing it from another person who's like the eldest in the siblings. So it confirmed what my sister's telling me.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, like the other part of the pressure is always like, I mean, I don't think my sisters necessarily expect me to do that, right? But then sometimes I also think about, okay, how do I make sure if something goes wrong for one of my siblings, I will still be able to help them out or like support them for whatever reason. So I think that part is like I brought it on myself. I don't think they necessarily expect me to do that. But then, yeah, as the eldest, we do think about those things.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was really interesting. What you mentioned, your childhood, you're growing up in the Philippines. But the other part is, I know a lot of Filipinos could potentially relate to this, which is like a lot of Filipinos in the older generation, they usually would opt for jobs as an overseas Filipino worker, for example, working as a foreign domestic helper or overseas nurse to support their families back in the Philippines. So growing up, what did you think of those professions? Did you ever consider those would be some options for you, or you actually decided to do something completely different since a young age?
Okay, so I feel like at some point, I did consider them primarily because everyone in my family, especially the ones here in the US, are like nurses, right? So it's not that they didn't give me the pressure, okay, you just be a nurse like your ate, your tita, your cousin, right? But they for sure made it clear that if you're a nurse, you'll have a good career, you'll have a good life. And I can see that. Like my aunts, my cousins are a living testament of the fruit of their labors by being a nurse. But personally, for me, it's not that I know what I wanted from the start, but maybe it's more of like, I know what I didn't want. So I don't necessarily know what I want yet, but I am certain with the things that I don't want to do. So it's not that I don't want to be a nurse, right? Or it's not that I don't want to be like this certain person and I don't have anything against them. But because I know what I don't want, I experiment with the things that's far away from those type of categories. So for example, just to also like give you a context, when I was choosing a degree in college, I didn't know exactly what I want to take. So I just went with whatever my friends are taking. I ended up taking hotel and restaurant management. So it's more on the hospitality side, customer service. And then as I go along during my internship, I realized, oh shucks, I don't like this industry. And it's too late for me to back out because I'm already on my third year and I'm about to graduate, right? So I told myself, okay, when I graduate, I need to find a job, whatever type of job, that would pull me away from the hospitality industry. Because we know that when you graduate, the first job you always get is usually connected to your degree, right? And I know for a fact that, okay, I don't want to be on the hospitality industry. So I took a job at a bank and then stayed there for 6 months. And that's when I started doing business development. So I did business development for a bank and I liked the job. I liked business development, but I didn't necessarily like the banking industry. So, I mean, maybe you can see the pattern already. I don't know what I like, but as I realize what I don't want, I just move away from it and then try again and then hopefully see what I want to do. So yeah, that's like my pattern. But, you know, as a child, even if you ask me like, you know, usually when you're 5 years old, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? You always say like, I want to be a teacher because I have my teachers here and like I see them as a role model. But I feel like it's also unfair to ask your child that early because they don't understand necessarily what these people are doing. And in terms of like being like an overseas Filipino worker, I used to say I don't want to be an OFW. And that changed completely when I went to LA to work here. I'm like, oh gosh, there's a whole new world outside of my comfort zone, outside of the Philippines. Like there's so much more. The reason why I said previously that I don't want to be an OFW is because I don't want to be away from my family. And I basically just don't want to be outside of my comfort zone. That's just it. Like, I don't want to start again. You know, I don't want to like make new friends, the petty stuff. But again, I didn't know that I like it until I experience it.
Yeah, you never know. And from what you mentioned, you like the function of business development. I could definitely see that because you seem to be very outgoing. It seems like, you know, relationship building is your strength. It's something that you seem to enjoy a lot. And I think it's kind of in a way not knowing what you want to be and figuring out, you know, what you don't want to be is actually a really good strategy. Because I think when I was 5, I already decided that I wanted to become a broadcast journalist. But I mean, it's nice to know what you wanted to do. But then I think eventually as you become an adult, as you go along, you realize, you know, things change. Like these days, perhaps people don't watch TV as much anymore.
Right.
So in a way, you know, like my childhood dream would become, you know, something stressful for me because it's like, okay, if I pivot away from that, am I disappointing my 5-year-old self, right?
Yes.
So I think what you did there is like deciding what you don't want to be is actually kind of a really smart strategy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, like you mentioned, right? You also have close family members and cousins who are based or born and raised in the US. Given, you know, we mentioned Filipinos migrating to the US is a very common thing.
Yes.
How would you actually compare your experience growing up in the Philippines to your cousins who grew up in the US? What are some of the key differences that you notice, let's say in terms of like mindsets and the overall experience?
Okay, that's a tricky question. Okay, so I'm gonna answer this question based from our conversations with my cousins because I don't have like a deep insight or I haven't really like talked about it with my cousins, like briefly, and maybe this is based from my observation as well. But I think the main difference is that when you grew up in the Philippines, because they're very intact with like the culture and the thought process of family comes first over anything and everything. That's where it differs because for me, I never had the chance to actually be independent and do things on my own because I'm still living with my parents. Because, you know, if you're in the Philippines, if you're not yet married, you should be still living with your parents. I never got the chance to actually be in a dormitory back in college. So from that perspective, I feel like I haven't had the chance to explore my independence versus like in the Western country where an independence is like not mandatory, but, you know, recommended.
It's like the norm.
Yeah, it's the norm. Exactly. So that's a big difference because I feel like having that on an early stage, you have like that sense of independence within you also shapes you as a person and as an adult. While for me, I'm just adjusting now. You know what I mean? Like, Oh, okay. I mean, I know how to do chores. Yes, that's very basic. I can cook, I can do laundry, I can iron my clothes, blah, blah, blah. But the independence in a sense we're in, it just dawned on me like, hey, I really need to figure things out here because my mom's not here. My sister's not with me. And I wish I had that confidence to actually figure things out. But I don't because I always thought the back of my head in the Philippines, na, I'm living with my family. So if something goes wrong, my mom would be there. My sister would be there. And like here, working here now in LA, I mean, yes, of course I have my aunt, but technically I don't have my mom. I don't have my, I don't have my sister. So that's just like a very surface level per se in terms of like difference. I mean, I would actually like to have been trained to be an independent individual in general. But at the same time, you know, people might see it like, oh, lucky you because you're like sheltered. But until you test that independence, you wouldn't appreciate being sheltered. It's like, oh shit, what am I supposed to do?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, that's a very surface level answer. I know. To be honest, I don't have like a general idea on, of course, how my cousins also grew up here in the US. You know, they might have their own, because they also have Filipino moms, Filipino dads. So I'm not sure how it also integrated in their childhood. But based from my conversations and how I see them now, I was like, oh, wow, you're so confident in yourself. Like, you can go to different places. Like, you want to move out. Okay, do it. Do your own stuff without even thinking about, hey, what's my mom's going to say or what my dad's going to say, or if I need to ask permission for this and that. Because they were raised like that. They were raised to be their own person at an early age. While for me, I feel like a child because I was not able to build that confidence. I mean, of course, it's also my fault because I've been so dependent to them. But you can't help it because that's what they say, you know. I tried to ask my mom back then if I could like have a dormitory back in college. And she was like, if you have a way to go home, you go home. So it's a no. So, you know, those type of things. I mean, like, you see, like, if you get what I mean, like, you know, yeah, maybe I'm lucky, I'm thankful. But at the same time, now that I'm working, it's like, oh shit, how I wish I was able to do this.
Yeah.
When I was still younger, at least now I'm more confident to actually work here and be alone, whatnot. So yes, I think those are the things that I see as like differences.
Yeah, perhaps I should do another episode where I would interview Filipino parents who are based in different places, because from what you just described, right, it makes it sound like the Filipino parents that your cousins have in the US, they seem to be a lot more open-minded or like chilled about them moving out. But then I do remember there's a friend of mine who's half Filipino, and she used to live in Hong Kong, and her mom is actually currently in Hong Kong. Her mom is half Filipino, half Macanese. And I remember she would tell me that her mom would get so upset about her moving out with her boyfriend. And I think even after years, you know, like 5-7 years after her moving out, the mom would still be upset about the fact that the daughter no longer lives with her. So yeah, so it's very interesting.
Oh my God, that boyfriend thing, that's also one thing. Like, that's a major difference. We can't have boyfriends until we graduate. Yeah.
From university.
Yeah, from university. Yeah, from uni. So I don't know, maybe it's just my parents, but
it's quite common, I think.
They're very strict. They're very conservative. Yeah, that's it. They're very conservative.
Wow.
With everything.
Now that brings me to ask, what is a regular day in the life of a young Filipino like yourself, like these days? What's the reality in the Philippines? Because a lot of people who don't have any knowledge about the Philippines, they would assume that the Philippines is poor or young people live in slums. But is it really the case?
Actually, yes and no. So yes, in a sense, yes, there are still some minority areas in the Philippines. Unfortunately, there are still some areas wherein they're not getting the proper education, not getting proper healthcare, not getting proper support from the government. So yes, there is still places, but not everywhere, you know. And what's actually good, especially with the Gen Z generation now, they're very open-minded. They want to be more informed, and they actually want to be more educated in general. In terms of, let's say, number one right now, because the elections just happened last May 9. And it's crazy to see how involved Gen Zs and millennials are, which is great because people are speaking out more. They want to be involved in terms of like, choosing the right candidate, the right people for the position. So, if we're going on the route we're in, what's the day-to-day life of like a Filipino person, even like a young Filipino? They're really all over social media. That's number one. But they're using social media wisely. They're using social media to raise awareness. They're using social media to speak about certain stuff that are relevant. And what's good about that is it also inspires other people. Philippines in general is a third world country. So it's different with Singapore or different with the US for sure. We're far apart from those types of countries. But everyone has social media. And regardless of like if you're rich, poor, middle class, I feel like everyone has Facebook, right? So since everyone is on social media, more young people are in social media. Even if you don't have access to televisions, as long as you have a phone, you have a Facebook, you will have access to information. That's for sure. There are pros and cons because, fake news or whatnot. But what I'm trying to like get into is that young people now, especially in the Philippines, I would like to say is more responsible, and more aware, more politically aware, and at the same time more involved. I mean, it's also sad to hear that when you talk about the Philippines, they would just think, it's a poor country, there are slums or whatnot. But there's more to that. You're just looking at just a part of the Philippines. There are beaches. The beaches here in the Philippines are like sick. So like it's very beautiful. So that's also one thing, right? It's unfortunate that there are still people who doesn't get proper education, but at the same time with social media right now, information is everywhere. And I'm happy to actually say that the people in my country and in my generation and younger are using it wisely.
And now, since we talked a little bit about your cousins who grew up in the US, here's an interesting question. Because as I continued to produce Proudly Asian, I've been getting a lot of messages. And some of these listeners could be like ethnically Filipino, but then they're based elsewhere, or some of them are actually Filipinos in the Philippines. And what I observed in general was that there's this interesting discussion around the Filipino-American identity.
Oh.
So there are some Filipinos listeners who grew up in the Philippines. They would tell me they think Filipino Americans cannot be regarded as Filipino. So I just want to get your thoughts on this. Like, why do people think that? How do you see this?
Number one, if there are people saying that Filipino Americans can't be tagged as Filipinos, I feel like they're just misinformed or doesn't understand how citizenship works and what exactly is a naturalized Filipino, a born Filipino, or an alienized Filipino. But personally, my opinion there is as long as you have Filipino blood, you're Filipino, regardless if it's just like half or 1/4. Yeah, because that's in your genes. You cannot change that. You have Filipino blood. But to be honest, this is also my personal observation, right? Filipinos tends to be very accepting. Why I say that is because every Hollywood celebrities who would have like a drop of Filipino blood, they will be like, yay, Filipinos! Like Bruno Mars, Olivia Rodrigo, the singer, Vanessa Hudgens. They celebrate Filipinos everywhere. So maybe there are some people who still doesn't understand that, or I don't know where they're coming from, but I would like to think it's coming from a place of actually being protective of the country. But for me, Filipino is not just the people who lives in the Philippines. That's just basically it. And again, as long as you have Filipino blood, you love the Philippines, you respect the country, you can also say you're Filipino by heart.
Yeah, I don't think there's a correct answer to this question because I think a lot of people, they would see this same issue from different lenses, right? And I guess,
Yes, for sure.
I guess they could be right with whatever reasoning they have, and how you see this, it could also be right based on your own experiences, right? And I quite like what you just pointed out. Filipinos are not just people who live in the Philippines, and this is exactly what the show Proudly Asian is trying to also tell everyone. Like Asians are not just those who live in Asia. There are Asians in a lot of other places, so they are also Asian in their own right.
Yes.
Despite the lived experience could be a bit different from Asians in Asia.
Exactly.
And I mean, since we're talking about the term Asian, when some people mention the term Asian, people normally think of East Asians, like Chinese,
yes,
Japanese,
Korean.
Exactly. They would be like, oh, anything other than that is not Asian. But we know it's not true because there are still Southeast Asia, South Asia, North and Central Asia, right?
Yeah.
And there's very little understanding about these places and their cultures. So from a Filipino perspective, do you think your culture is understood widely?
No, I don't think so. There's a lot of factors in it because we're colonized by a lot of countries. US, Japan, Spain. So we're a mixture of a lot of things. But yes, I totally agree with what you say. When they say Asian, they don't think about it's okay. Asian, Filipina, Asian, Filipino. It's we're our own category, which is okay, nice, but we're technically Asians as well. Because in our office, I have Singaporean colleagues, I have Korean colleagues, and it's funny. Like one time, we're talking to a client, and they were like, "Oh, you have a diverse team. Oh, so you're Korean. Singaporean. Oh, Asians. You, Filipina." Like, oh yes. I'm Asian too. I'm part of the group. I mean, it's sad in a sense. We are Filipinos in general, even in entertainment, they're not represented wisely. If you say like a whole Asian cast, you don't often see Filipinos. Right? So the representation is definitely lacking, especially in the entertainment industry. And I don't want to think of it as, maybe these people are not well informed. Maybe it's also because of geographical references. And it's actually like a stereotype already. If you're Asian, you have to be part of the yellow race. You have to have a certain look. And like for me, actually, I'm not regarded as Asian. If not Filipina, they think I'm Hispanic. Yeah, so like way off than Asians. And sometimes it kind of makes you feel alienated, especially if you're with a diverse Asian group. I usually just make a joke out of it. But at the back of my mind, it's like, I'm Asian too, I mean, I want to be accepted as part of that category or as part of that group. Yes, it's nice to have like your own category. Oh, Asians, Filipina. But if you look at it in a general sense, we're all Asians. Why are you alienating a certain ethnicity?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I also don't understand that, but it's all about having the right information and really understanding what is it about. It might be like an honest mistake, for most people, but at the minimum, if you have the right representation, people will be more informed, especially in entertainment, right? So even if you don't read about it, if you see on movies or in TVs how they represent Filipinos or how they represent Asians correctly, then at least it would also help people be like educated na, oh, okay, it's not just Korean, it's not just Japanese, it's not just Chinese.
Exactly. I think what you just mentioned there, you also pointed out a little bit about how Filipinos, historically, they are just not very much represented in international movies or entertainment, and only until very recently, right? I hope I'm not spoiling this for anyone. I hope everyone would have seen Spider-Man by now, but
Oh,
it
yeah.
was very recently that we saw a Lola in the Spider-Man movie, and that was quite refreshing. And that's when people began to realize, oh, yeah, like that's what Filipinos look like, or, that's Filipino. But then again, I think what you mentioned there is also quite true. Like a lot of the times, stereotypes or biases against, Filipinos could also be coming from fellow Asians as well, not just, from the Western crowd.
Yes.
I just want to know, what are some of the common misconceptions about the Philippines or stereotypes about Filipinas that you have heard of that you thought was quite ridiculous?
Number one is the accent. If they hear like that you have at least a neutral accent, or in a way like like an Americanized accent, they would be like, oh, your accent's different. You don't sound Filipino. Like, how should I sound? I mean, I know you've seen it probably on social media, how they make it as a joke, like the Filipino English accent. But it's not like that. I mean, so maybe that's one thing. I really find it ridiculous. Like, okay, I'm sorry for not sounding Filipino enough for you. That's like always in my head, because I usually get that comment, oh, your English is very nice. I'm like, thank you. But is it a compliment? Like, what do you expect? Or they'll be like, oh, you have an accent. I'm like, yes. Or sometimes they feel like you're trying too hard. You shouldn't sound that way. So that's like top of mind. Like, it's crazy. Like, okay, I'm sorry. I don't sound like Filipino English to you, but that's one thing. And then I guess the other like stereotypes that I've heard, especially when I'm here, is that when they ask me what my job is and I don't say a nurse, they'll be like, oh, and what would I take of that? Oh, so I met a couple of friends of friends, wherein when they ask me, oh, what do you do? Like, okay, I'll tell them what I do. And they're like, oh, you're not a nurse. I'm like, yes. And the next question is, why? Like, why not? I mean, I know it's like an innocent question for them because of the stereotypes. That's what they know. Like, okay, you're a Filipina in the US, you must be a nurse, or you must be studying, nursing or whatnot. So those are the main two things that I personally experience here in LA, which I don't understand, but I also would like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't know any better. Maybe they're just really like not informed, or maybe it's a conversation starter. Yes, it is. But if you hear it like 5-10 times already, it gets to you like, what's wrong? So yes, I think those are some of the stereotypes that I receive personally, but I also know that there's more. For example, if you're like a Filipina here in the US, it's either you married someone here, or if you have like, oh, I have my family here, my mom, my dad, usually I'll say, oh, did your mother marry like a foreigner just to get a green card? That's also very ridiculous. They always use it as a joke. So like they will tell me, oh, just marry someone here so you could stay here forever. And I'm like, what? Yeah, the fastest way to get a visa is to just marry a foreigner and get a green card. Is that what you think about Filipinos? We will do anything and everything just to be in the US? Like, no, we have other ways. It actually triggers me.
Yeah.
Because it's crazy to think that Filipinas will just engage, or like, even if you have a friend who's like a guy and a foreigner or white or Western, they'll think, oh, just marry him so that you can get a green card. Like, not everyone wants to live in the US.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
That's my point. That's like the triggering part for me. Like, guys, not everything is about the US. Not everything is about you. Do you think that Filipinas are just that easy and that naive to just marry someone, a stranger, a foreigner, just so they can get a green card? I mean, what? That's like an insult in all levels.
Yeah, I mean, that's also kind of rich coming from them, implying that your best option as a Filipina is to live in the US or marry someone white.
Yes.
They think that's your best option, but no, actually, there are so many more amazing places out there that you could have chosen that could be, better than the US.
Yes, and maybe what I'm trying to point out is that you can actually go to the US without being a nurse and without marrying a foreigner.
That's true.
So I think those are the things that they also don't understand. Like they're actually confused, like how I got the job, why was I hired in a company based in the US? And I'm like, there are ways. You have to work for it. You have to look for it. It's not always, oh, okay, you have an American dream. Okay, be a nurse, marry someone. And to be honest, not everyone actually has an American dream. That's what they need to understand. Yeah, so I guess those are the top 3 that I personally receive, like what I observe, like in general.
I mean, it brings me to ask if there's one thing that you want to tell the world about the Philippines. What is that one thing?
Philippines is a very beautiful country on its own in a lot of aspects. Not just the beaches, not just the people, but actually in general. It's also a progressive country, and that's what I appreciate about the Philippines as a whole. And people don't see that because they only know what they know. They only know what they see on the surface level. You have to experience it to appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes, and they have amazing people as well. Like you mentioned, they're so friendly, so accepting. And I generally had a really good experience because I really love Filipino food. So
really?
I think it's so nice to see Filipino people, their face, they just kind of light up, or they seem very delighted to see me liking Filipino food.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. But then Filipino food is amazing. And I do think there isn't enough understanding about the Filipino cuisine. But what is your favorite Filipino dish?
Oh, my favorite is sinigang. So it's a pork sour soup. So you get the best of both worlds, wherein you have a soup. It's sour, but also savory. You can put pork or beef or shrimp in it. It's very versatile. And it's very great with rice in it. It's good on its own, but I need rice to have the full experience.
That's true. Do you normally have it for breakfast or for any meals?
For lunch and dinner. So for Filipino foods, actually, breakfast is also very important to us. And we have a certain Filipino breakfast. So it's usually fried rice, fried egg, hot dogs. Or if you want to go on the more traditional route, it's dried fish, tomatoes, salted egg, and fried rice. It's a different category on its own. If you say oh, I want a Filipino breakfast, that's always oh, okay, you want fried rice, egg, and something else. Yeah.
I see.
And then the soups like the adobo, the sinigang, the bulalo, those are usually reserved for lunch and dinner.
Yeah, I think for breakfast, correct me if I'm wrong, right? They normally would have some sort of silog. I think silog means...
Oh, yeah, silog. So silog is sinangag, fried rice, and egg, itlog. Silog. So you have hot silog, hot dog plus the silog. You have chick silog, which is chicken plus the silog. So silog is the base.
Yeah.
Add anything that you want. And it's that food plus silog. Hot silog, chick silog, to silog, tocino plus silog.
Long silog is my favorite.
Long silog. Yeah.
For our listeners who are not sure what this means, long silog, silog means egg and rice, right?
Yes.
And then long is the short for longanisa, which is a type of sausage that's common in the Philippines. And the version that I tried was really good. It's pan fried, and then it's sweet on the outside, but a little bit savory as well. So yeah, I really like that dish.
Great. Oh my God, I'm happy to hear that from you. Because we also have different types of longanisa. So we have garlic, we have pork, we have skinless, we have chicken longanisa. So you should try those 2 different variations of long silog.
Yeah, I will do. I wish the Jollibee in Hong Kong had long silog as well. Because I know the Jollibee in the Philippines do that for breakfast. Yeah.
You don't have it in Hong Kong? They don't have long silog?
No.
Oh, no. Just make one at home. It's easy.
Okay. You can send me your recipe.
For sure.
And now it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is
Rapid Fires.
In this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions they've got asked at some points in life, and also some common biased questions Asians get asked a lot. So, Mauie, are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, first question. Filipinos are not Asian.
Who told you that? We are Asians. 100%.
Next one. All Filipinos are domestic helpers.
Then why am I not? Am I not Filipino? You're wrong. Stop it. Stop that. It ends here. No. Not everyone is a domestic helper.
How do you speak English so perfectly?
I try to mimic everyone I see. So later I'll be like mimicking your accent. No, because in school, English is recommended. So all of our subjects are in English. We actually have a specific subject for Filipino and it stops in high school. And the rest is like all taught in English. So everyone, if you go to school, we will have like an English only zone that if you speak a Tagalog word, you have to pay a certain amount in a jar. So it's very encouraged. Yeah, English is very encouraged in the country. That's why.
And Filipinos abroad are only capable of low-income jobs.
Talk to my aunts and then talk to me again. No. You know, it doesn't matter if you're Filipino or, you know, whatever ethnicity. If you work hard, you know, you will reap the benefits of those hard work. So it's not like, oh, you're Filipino, you can only do low-income jobs. Hell no. We didn't study university just to settle for something less. You know, we have dreams, we have goals.
And Filipinos are uneducated.
Oh my gosh, my bachelor's degree is shaking. No, I mean, if that's what you think, there you go. But again, it actually depends on the person. Doesn't matter who you are. If you want to study, you do it. But don't generalize everyone, you know? No one's better than the other person. Yeah, that's just mean.
And next one. All Filipinos can sing.
Yes. Yes, we can sing. Doesn't necessarily mean we're good at it, but yes, we can.
Yeah, it's interesting to observe there are a lot of singers for Disney movies. They are Filipinos. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But thank you for playing this round of Rapid Bias,
Thank
Mauie.
you.
Now, to wrap up the conversation, I just want to know, other than the basics, what is one phrase in Tagalog that you would like to teach our audience?
Aside from the basic, because you know, like everyone's like mahal kita, which is I love you, mabuhay. Okay, I'm thinking of something that's very interesting that I feel like if a Filipino would hear a foreigner say it, they'll be like super happy. Maybe like a phrase is kain tayo, because Filipinos love to eat. So kain tayo means let's eat. Because, you know, Filipinos loves hosting. They like to cook. They like celebrations. So, you know, if you'll say, okay, kain tayo, I feel like they'll just light up and they'll be like, yes, let's do it. What do you want? So I guess that's something that everyone should learn. You know, if you go to the Philippines, like go to a restaurant, tell your friends, hey, kain tayo. I feel like they'll just light up like, oh, wow, that's so cute. You know it. Let's do it. You know?
Nice. Yeah. And I mean, one more question about Tagalog, right? I remember a while ago, I was watching a YouTube video and the video was basically challenging Filipinos in the Philippines to just speak Tagalog without mixing English, which is kind of, you know, like they speak kind of Taglish.
Yes.
I just want to know, is it actually very challenging for a Filipino person to just speak Tagalog without adding any English words in it?
Actually, yes. Because like what I told you, right? We were from the very beginning, from the time we start to go to school, we're always taught in English. So there are some phrases also that we learn that doesn't have a direct translation to Tagalog words. And some English words are just shorter than the Tagalog translation. So we usually say it. So like, for example, if like they ask you, let's say, how are you? Your usual answer for a Filipino is okay lang. okay is actually an English word. And if I do it in a direct, just purely Tagalog, it will be like, ayos lang. Instead of okay lang, ayos lang. But you don't hear a lot of people say ayos. It's always okay. Because it has been like the norm. It's such a short word wherein people won't even bother translating it to Tagalog directly. And so Tagalog is actually a complicated language that we need to have a whole subject about it, a whole course about it. Like the technicalities of subject-verb agreement, like from a grammar standpoint, it's very different. And there are different variations already as time goes by for certain Tagalog words that it's super deep, that it's also not taught to you in school. So there are some people that we call Makata. So Makata. So if you are Makata, it means that you only speak Tagalog in its purest form. So you're a Makata, you don't speak any English word. Even if, let's say, English word doesn't have a direct translation to Tagalog, you will say it in a different way. So maybe just to give you an example, education, that's English, right? If a Makata will say that, it will be edukasyon. It's kind of sounds the same, but the spelling is different, that it's more like, I don't know, like, because it doesn't have a direct translation, so they just changed the spelling that it doesn't sound super English, So to answer the question, it is kind of hard to just speak Tagalog in its purest form because we were trained to actually speak in English.
And finally, what does it mean to be proudly Filipino?
Oh, thank you for that wonderful question. For me personally, it might be different for everyone, right? But for me, like being proudly Filipino, number one is respecting the culture. So you can shout to the world that you're a proud Filipino, but if you don't respect Filipinos, you don't respect the culture, are you really proud? So for you to be able to say you're a proud Filipino, you have to accept it within yourself that you are a Filipino and you respect the values that you have as a Filipino. So I guess that's my general answer. But also, I feel like if you say that you are proudly Filipino, you celebrate everyone. Even if it's just half Filipino, 1/4 Filipino, point something Filipino. If you're a proud Filipino, you just don't celebrate yourself. You just don't celebrate the people in the Philippines, but everyone who has Filipino blood and who loves the Philippines. Yeah.
That's nice. Thank you so much for being on the show, Mauie.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.